What is up, party people? Welcome to another exciting episode of Revenue-Driven CMO. I am your main man, Chris Mechanic. We have an awesome episode here for you today. It is all about YouTube. YouTube is one of the best and least talked about opportunities in digital marketing today, especially among B2Bs. So we're going to dive into it with that angle, but it's pretty much universal. So even if you're a B2C, stick with us. Because the truth is that YouTube can be very powerful regardless of B2B, B2C, even nonprofits and govs. I mean, pretty much everybody can benefit. But it's enormously powerful for any brand that's already advertising significantly, like that could be social, CTV, linear TV, radio, direct mail, traditional, whatever. If you're already advertising, it's incredibly powerful. Why? Because the brand awareness that you've already built, that you've already bought more or less from your other advertising, gives you a natural built-in advantage that can make YouTube incredibly profitable, actually, almost immediately. So you can think of it almost as a way to reap the fruit of all of the brand advertising dollars that you've sown so faithfully over the years. So without further ado, let's get into it. We'll start with the bull case for YouTube, why you should even care about this, and we'll bust a couple of myths along that way. And I'll tell you why we're doubling down on YouTube in 2025 and beyond, even for our B2B clients. Then we will give you a little more tactical perspective and points of view about how you can jump onto the YouTube bandwagon and get your campaigns humming before everyone and their grandmothers learn about it and really the opportunity window starts to close. So I'll see you on the other side.
You're listening to the Revenue-Driven CMO, the podcast where we break down the most effective growth strategies from top marketing leaders. Join us every week as we dive into their stories, challenges, and insights that drive revenue. This show is brought to you by Level Agency, where AI-enabled performance marketing expertise blends the art and science of marketing to deliver measurable results.
So why should we care about YouTube? Why are we so bullish on it? Number one, insane scale. YouTube is the number 2 most popular website in the world with over 2.5 billion monthly active users. That's billion with a B. So no matter who you are, your customers are on YouTube. Yes, even the very nichiest of the niche B2Bs, even if you're selling, into Fortune 500 CMOs, you can rest assured that a large portion of your audience is on YouTube, whether they know it or not. They're on YouTube. Number 2, powerful targeting. So a lot of times in B2B circles, folks will sort of scoff at the idea of YouTube, thinking like, hey, even if our audience is on there, like we can't really target them, but you can go from as granular as targeting based on keywords that users searched within Google. You can target on apps they use, websites they visit, and on the granular side. And then on the broad side, you can go as broad as just general demographics. So every audience is reachable, and that's including your first party data audiences for both in the B2C and B2B spaces. So the data that you already have, you can use to target campaigns on YouTube. Number 3, CPMs are cheap compared to other big platforms. Like if you're spending 10, 20 bucks a click, sometimes even 50 bucks a click in super competitive spaces on search, or you're dropping like $50 to $100 CPMs on YouTube, like why wouldn't you want to get in front of that same audience for, sometimes half of the cost or less? Number 4, YouTube is an immersive long-form platform. So that means deeper audience engagement. That means more time spent per session. Users aren't in this sort of like doom scrolling mode where they're just like going from thing to thing, like sort of like, ADD style. They're sitting still, they're watching, they're listening, they're learning. So it's such a powerful brand builder compared to social, which is much more random and bite-sized. And so with that brand building, it can also be used as a powerful direct response mechanism which is oftentimes what you'll hear is like people will file YouTube in sort of the brand bucket. But from what we've seen, it can be very powerful from a direct response perspective as well. Number 5, precise measurability. So that black box effect, gone. You can measure everything from views and clicks on YouTube down to interactions on your website, down to leads, phone calls, sales, and everything in between. So if you're comparing this to, you know, a TV, like a linear TV or a radio, it's just night and day. The amount of data signals that you get back when you're running YouTube campaigns is really incredible. And there's a lot that you can do with it, which we'll get into in a second. Number 6, reasonable creative costs. So no need for some, you know, big, huge 6-figure TV shoot. This is fast and nimble. The creative, a lot of it, you can use stuff that you already have. If you've got a good video editor, you know, you can spin up probably all types of different content with things that you already have or things that you can make for cheaply. User-generated content actually does really well. So, you know, you can connect with influencers or others. So there's a lot of different creative techniques, which we'll talk about here in a second. But it doesn't have to cost you a fortune. That's the good news. Number 7, fast testing cycles. So you can learn what works in real time and cut losers quickly, iterate on winners. But again, if you're comparing this to, say, a linear TV where, you know, the testing cycles are measured in months or years, these testing cycles can be measured in days or weeks. Number 8, Google's AI brain. So Google knows everything about everyone, right? They say that if you want to know somebody's deepest, darkest secrets, look at their search history. YouTube provides a way to tap into all of that data in a totally privacy compliant and non-creepy way, but then program and fire custom signals based on actions that users take, and then continually train Google's AI brain to find better and better leads and customers for your business and or your offer. And perhaps the most powerful, little known, least known secret of YouTube is the first 29 seconds are free. So Google doesn't charge if you're running skippable ads until the user views more than 30 seconds of a video. So what does that mean? That means that a lot of users are going to hit that skip button after, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds. And those views are not charged. It's free brand awareness. And that's why you'll see a lot of times at the beginning of YouTube videos, folks will oftentimes qualify within the hook. Like they'll say, hey, listen up, Fortune 500 CEOs. And in doing so, they're calling out the audience. And so anybody who is a Fortune 500 CEO would be like, ooh, that sounds good. Anybody who's not would be like, this isn't for me. They would skip. You wouldn't get charged. And of course, you know, sometimes the right person will not skip until 20 or 25 seconds. And so it gives you a chance to deliver a message to, you know, get a little bit tiny piece of mind share, and you multiply that by millions and millions of skipped videos, and it's just free impressions all day long. So bottom line, it's an amazing opportunity. It's basically an advertiser's dream, but many brands fail to make YouTube profitable. So they categorize it in this brand bucket or just forget about it altogether. And that's a really big, expensive mistake that you can avoid if you know the secrets. Okay, so now we've learned about why YouTube is so amazing, why we're so excited about it, as well as many leading brands, both on the B2B and the B2C side. Here's some of the keys to success in getting started. First and foremost, it's all about the ads, right? Like I am known for saying, hey, you can know everything that there is to know about the platform. If I make better ads than you, I'm still going to win, right? So what are amazing ads? There's a lot of episodes that we've talked about this in the past. You know, there could be an entire episode on that. But the the key really, there's two major keys. One is the hook. The hook is the first like 2 to 4 seconds of an ad. And that really is what's going to determine whether somebody is going to watch or listen to the rest of the ad or not. There's a lot of different techniques for hooks. Like I was saying, some people use that hook to disqualify. Some people will use that hook to, show some sort of pattern interrupt, like some kind of visual or imagery or sound or language that's just going to like kind of snap you out of your normal pattern and get you to pay attention. The hook oftentimes is what we will test. So like we'll have an ad, and you want to sort of think about ads in 3 parts. So you've got your hook, you've got the body, and then you've got the call to action where you deliver the offer. And so we think about it kind of modularly. And a lot of times, especially if it's a small campaign and we don't have really that much budget to test with, we're really going to test the living heck out of that hook. Like we're going to try 5 or 10 different hooks with the same body and the same CTA. As you have more and more budget and you achieve more and more scale, then you can test more variations. But the hook really is the key. If the hook doesn't work and, people are skipping or not being engaged, then it doesn't matter how good your offer is, right? The second thing to think about is offer. And this is where a lot of people will not get it right, especially in B2B circles. The term offer isn't really used the way that it is in B2C. But the offer is very important and very powerful. And you want to make that offer as irresistible as possible. Like you want to make it almost like a too good to be true type of an offer. So this is much more challenging in B2B. The typical approach is like, hey, get a free demo. Like that's a really weak offer. Downloading a piece of content could be a strong offer if the content is really, really good. Other forms of strong offers could be like a free trial, I think is generally pretty strong. Any kind of a money back guarantee is pretty strong. We could do a whole episode on offers, but you want to think through, what is something that you could offer people that they would be dumb not to take it. Another thing between B2Bs and B2Cs that I think B2Bs could take something from is that B2Cs oftentimes expect to lose money on that first transaction and they make their money back on subsequent transactions. Whereas a lot of times B2Bs will think like, oh my goodness, we can't do that. Like we would lose money if somebody, like for instance, in software, it's like, okay, it takes us 3 months to onboard them and it takes us a lot of time and this and that. Like we can't possibly onboard somebody for free. But a lot of times in B2C circles, they'll think like, hey, if my payback window is 4 or 5 months, like that's pretty good, right? So I'm willing to lose money on the first 3 months because I know that 80% of the people that sign up are going to stay with me for 2 years. So that's actually quite profitable. So anyway, that's the first key, and probably the most important key is to make amazing and effective ads. The hook is the king. The offer is the queen. So keep those 2 things in mind. The other thing on ads is that you want to think about performance, like hook and offer, that's performance. But you also want to think about brand because, you have the opportunity here to build brand. So you want to, involve your brand team and your communications team and make sure that you're putting the right message and the right vibe forward. But YouTube campaigns can be profitable on the front end. They can also do an amazing job building awareness, recall rates, affinity, and drive incremental efficiency across your other channels, like across TV and search and social. I'll tell you a very quick story. We had a client who was interested in YouTube. They were a B2C client. They spent millions and millions of dollars a month across TV, radio, display, you name it, search, everything. And they knew their numbers cold. They knew exactly what they needed to pay for a lead. They knew exactly how to measure the conversion rates of a lead to the next step and all the way down the funnel. So they were really sophisticated and scientific with it. They wanted to try YouTube. They were really optimistic about it. We put a really solid campaign together and we tried it. The cost per lead was about $100. Whereas on social, the cost per lead was like, in the 20s and 30s. So pretty much right away, they said, hey, look, this probably isn't working. But then two things happened. One thing was that the conversion rate from lead to the next step in the funnel was really, really high, like double or almost triple what it was on social, which means that the quality of the leads were very good. And I think that the reason for that is because of that, because of the state of mind that the user is in, because of the immersive and the long form experience in the platform. And the ads were generally longer, like on Meta, for instance, like the optimal length that we tested into was like around 30 seconds. But on YouTube, we found that the longer, like 1 or 2 minute ads tend to do much, much better, both on the cost per lead side, as well as like on the lead conversion side. But the other thing that happened, so they were like, hey, look, when you factor in lead quality, it almost pays for itself in terms of the cost per lead. So we're still intrigued. But how do we figure out whether this is driving any incremental lift? Like, how do we know that we wouldn't have gotten those leads anyway from our different channels? So what we did was a lift test, and the style of it was a geo holdout. So we selected a few geographies that were relatively consistent in the way that they performed. And we ran ads only in those geographies so that we could measure like, hey, how are these geographies now performing differently across the median? And what we observed was really astonishing. Like in terms of the incremental efficiencies that it drove, especially across search, it suddenly changed the equation to an extent that basically what we were seeing in platform, the truth was about 1/5 of that. So in other words, if we're seeing $100 per lead in platform, the truth was that it was about $20 a lead, coupled with this idea that those leads were converting at a much, much higher rate. So suddenly, when you measured it on an incrementality basis, YouTube became extremely profitable. So of course, immediately, we started scaling those campaigns up and we started making a lot more ads and creative. And they're still to this day spending over $1 million, I think it's close to $2 million a month on YouTube. So don't always judge a book by its cover in terms of the data. And that leads to the next key to success, which is advanced tracking and data analytics. So we talked about this idea of incrementality testing. That is a more advanced concept. Before you get there, you have to make sure that you've got the basics of the tracking in place. So what does that mean? That means you want to definitely measure the action on the website. So if it's a form fill, if it's a free trial sign up, if you're an e-commerce or a B2C and it's like, a phone call or a purchase, whatever that action is, you definitely have to measure that. Then the rule of thumb is you want to measure at least one micro action before that action takes place and at least one micro action after that action takes place. So, and that's at the minimum. Sometimes you'll do 2 pre-conversion events and 2 post-conversion events. But those pre-conversion events can be things such as once they hit the landing page, whether they completed the form or not, they clicked on a certain link or they highlighted certain text or they, spent a certain amount of time on that landing page before bouncing, or they viewed a certain number of pages would work too. You could also use pre-conversion events that take place on YouTube itself. So like, let's suppose that you're running a longer form ad that's 2 or 3 minutes. For somebody to sit through 75% of that ad would be pretty significant, right? especially if it's an ad that's pretty specific to what it is that you're offering. So, and you can totally use that. That's a pre-built, pre-configured event that you can find inside of YouTube, and just say, hey, 75% watch, we would consider that to be a micro conversion. On the post side of things, this is where thank you pages can be really effective. So like on the post conversion side, we'll oftentimes have multi-step conversion action. So for instance, it's like first step might be a relevant question. Like, let's say it's, what is your, like, how much investable assets do you have for, if you're a wealth manager? And then somebody selects that. So that might be the initial conversion. And then, or that might be a pre-conversion. Then they go to a form, and then that's form number 1. And then there's a form number 2, which would be the post-conversion form. So you might need to get a little bit creative, especially if you're a B2B, but the thank you page really is where that happens. Have some sort of a link on that, or some sort of like an optional additional form. And that can be your post conversion. Another excellent post conversion, of course, if you're B2B, and this is a little bit more advanced too, but offline events. So post conversion signals from your CRM can range from like, hey, salesperson made contact, deal created, deal qualified, you know all the steps, but you can actually integrate CRM with Google Ads or YouTube so that you can fire those conversions in platform. Why is that important? It's for the AI. So this is the next key to success, is once you have all of those data signals in platform, then you can really start to leverage the AI and the data training. So you can collect and label and manage and integrate those various data signals in a way that really helps to train Google's AI to find you the highest quality leads and folks that are most likely to respond to your offer. So anytime you're creating a new campaign, one of the first questions that YouTube is going to ask is, what's the goal of this campaign? And they give you a blanket, like it's generate leads or find customers or whatever. But then they also give you an option to choose a specific signal to optimize toward. And if you're a B2B in a low volume kind of environment, then like, of course you would want to optimize to close one deal, right? But if you don't have enough volume of those deals coming through, it's not going to be enough data for the AI to really learn. So then you go one step up the funnel. Okay, are you getting enough contracts sent, or enough qualified, or enough, contact made? So Google is going to say that you need 50 events per month. I think it is. They changed the threshold here and there. I personally think that you can get by with less. Like, I've seen campaigns be optimized, but at a minimum, you're going to need probably 30 of those signals to be fired a month. So, if you're a B2B, say, and your target cost per opportunity is like $1,000 or $2,000, you need to take that into account, because if you need 30 of them for a campaign to be optimized, that campaign alone is going to cost you like $60K a month, right? So that's why you want to have those different data signals in there, so that you might say, hey, like 60K a month, like we can't do that, especially because we want to run these 3 different campaigns. That's going to be, 200 grand a month. So what you then want to do is you want to take the conversion objective, or the conversion, not the objective, but like the target, the metric that you're targeting to optimize toward, and you want to just move that up the funnel. So a lot of times you'll start with maybe cost per lead or cost per engaged visitor even. And then as you collect more and more data, you can create new campaigns that are targeting lower and lower down the funnel. Next is post-click experience optimization. So you really want to think about the experience that happens after the click. Most of your traffic is going to be on mobile. So you really need to optimize for that experience first. It needs to load quickly. It needs to really quickly reiterate whatever it was that offer is. Like there can't really be any sort of a disconnect. Like I was saying, the agency in general, we really prefer to break that conversion out into like more bite-sized pieces, so that instead of greeting somebody with this long and daunting looking form, you break that out into bite-sized pieces. I often prefer starting with non-PII questions. So as opposed to starting with like name, email, phone number, and then getting to the next step, you might start with the questions such as like, what's your investable net worth, or, whatever the questions are that your salesperson would ask somebody after they've been qualified. Those are the questions you want to lead with. Like if you are, say if you're a recruiter, right? Like you might want to start with like, hey, are you a candidate or are you an employer? So you can really grease the wheels by starting that conversion process with those non-PII questions. And especially so if you can break that up over multiple steps or multiple screens. I also like a post-click experience that is designed purely to qualify. So for instance, we call these jump pages, and these are pages that are built specifically to come before your main landing page. It's typically going to be just like a big, compelling headline, a little tiny bit of text, and then just like a yes or no selector. Are you this thing? If yes, boom, you're going to fire that as your pre-conversion signal, and you'll get a lot of those, right? But in doing so, you can really clearly train Google on like who, folks that click yes on this are good. Folks that click no on this are bad. And if you do it that way, you're going to get a lot of data back really quickly that will probably be invaluable to optimizing your campaigns. So we talked about a lot. This is getting a little bit longer than we had hoped. I want to very quickly just take you through the steps in a chronological order, and I'll say a couple of things about each step. But like I said, this is getting a little bit long. If we see a sizable response to this, I'm happy to do a follow-up going deeper into each of these steps. If you are interested in that, you can just ping us on LinkedIn, use @the Revenue-Driven CMO, and we will get right back to you as soon as possible. But let me just walk you through these 7 steps. And some of them will be familiar and they'll be, revisits. But I'll say a couple things about each one. So step 1, tracking and measurement. This is really like the first thing pretty much that you want to do. You want to make sure that the tracking on your website itself is airtight. Pretty much every interaction should be tracked and fired in as an event. The conversion itself, like the form submission or the phone call or whatever, should be tracked as a conversion. I'm assuming you're using GA4, but probably other platforms are similar. You want to get that tracking tight. You want to have a pre-conversion event or 2 or 3. It's kind of like the more the merrier. I mean, you're not going to optimize for all of them, but it doesn't hurt to track various pre-conversion events. And then of course you want to look at some post-conversion events, whether those come from CRM. If you're a B2C, those might come from, a repeat purchase or the, click share with a friend or whatever it is. But you want to definitely have the conversion itself, the pre-conversion events, and the post-conversion events for your tracking and measurement. Step 2 is audiences and data onboarding. So we didn't talk much about this. If you're a B2B, I would definitely suggest a first-party data approach. That means, grab a data set from your CRM, share it with Google, and allow Google to match and model that audience. That's a great way to start. Another great way to start is with retargeting, right? So there's 2 ways you can use retargeting. There's way A is like just simply retarget, right? Like folks that have visited your site in the last 7 days from other channels, like why not show them an ad, right? The other way that you can use retargeting is to create modeled audiences. So you can say, hey, folks that are customers right now, like they have logged into the platform. let's put them into our YouTube account, but we're not going to target them with ads. Instead, we're going to create a modeled audience, like a lookalike or a similar to audience that we can use for our prospecting. And, it's not going to be perfect, right? But when you couple that seed audience from your existing customers and you couple that with Google's AI brain and all the signals that you're going to be firing to let Google know who's good and who's not, that's really, I think, the secret on the B2B side. For B2Cs, we generally want to start broad. And usually what we're going to do is we're going to take our best crack at the creative. We're going to have like 2 really good ads in terms of 2 good bodies, two good and distinct offers. And then we're just going to pair those up with like 5 or 10 hooks each, and we're going to run them broadly. So like we're going to take these same ads and we're going to test like 5 or 10 different audiences, largely on the broader side, right? With small budgets on each. And we're going to look at those pre-conversion signals to see essentially like which of these are generating really engaged and qualified users at the lowest cost, whether or not they actually become purchasers. And that's going to be our initial signal. The other thing that I'll mention in terms of audiences and data onboarding is custom intent audiences are really, really powerful, both for B2Bs and B2Cs. What these are is that you can target folks that have searched certain keywords in the past 30 days. So for instance, let's say that you are in the HR software business. So you want you want to target people searching for HR software, applicant tracking system, these different things. You're running those and you're targeting those on Google ads and probably paying 20, 30 bucks a click. With a custom intent audience, you can get in front of that same exact audience, those folks that have searched those same exact terms for much, much lower per click. I mean, it's going to be dependent on your click-through rate, but like in terms of a CPM on Google, you're probably paying like over $1,000 CPM. On YouTube, it'll probably be like 20 or 30 bucks. The cost per click is all going to be dependent on that click-through rate. So I hope you got, strong hooks and strong offers in those ads. But yeah, you should definitely try custom intent audiences. I oftentimes will like to try like 2 or 3 of them, each with like 5 or 7, sort of thematically related terms. So you might have one with applicant tracking with a few of those applicant tracking terms, one with just general HR software, and then one with a different keyword theme. But that is the gist and, the 80-20 of audiences and data onboarding. 3 is targeting and account structure. So we started talking about targeting just now in terms of the custom intent audiences and actually we touched on account structure as well. So just as a refresher, this idea of like, hey, come with your best possible creative and then have a bunch of small campaigns running at lower budget at first and start measuring some of those pre-conversion signals. Or if you have more budget and you're higher volume and you can measure the actual conversion signals, more power to you. Targeting wise, B2Cs, you generally want to go pretty broad. So like I'll do an affinity group, for instance, and just have all of the affinity, just add all of them in there. I'll do, depending on what your offer is, I might just do general demographics, like male and female over the age of 18, whatever it is. Or you can limit those. You could say over the age of 25 or whatever, what have you. But on the B2C side, you definitely want to start broad. On the B2B side, I would not necessarily recommend that, but you want to go with broadest possible relevant audience. So those were the things such as make a modeled audience of folks that have logged onto your product, like customers. Don't target that actual matched audience, but target the model that Google creates of that matched audience. That would be an example of broad as possible. You could also create an audience of folks that have viewed your thank you page, or folks that have viewed, key pages of your website, like product pages or pricing pages, and spent a considerable amount of time, like 2 minutes or more on your site. So there's a lot of different ways. You don't want to go like pure broad if you're B2B, but you want to go broadest possible relevant audience. And otherwise use the same format. So best possible ads, call it 5 or 10 variations of ads, largely testing 2 different bodies, 2 different CTAs, and several hooks for each. So I guess that would be more than 5 or 10. It'd be, but you want to run those at low budgets and watch for those pre-conversion signals and try to find pre-conversion signals that are really meaningful. So we talked about tracking and measurement, talked about audiences and data onboarding, talked about targeting and account structure. Step 4, also probably a critically important one, offers and landing pages or funnels. So we talked a lot about this. I would suggest looking up, just do some research on offers. There's a guy, Alex Hormozy, who has like a nice formula that he does, which is, it's an equation. It's like, the power of the dream, or like the desirability of the dream. So the dream, if you're in HR software, is going to be like, most qualified applicants ever, or like seamless HR process, or whatever that dream is, that promise, plus the likelihood of achieving that dream. So think credibility, think proof, think case studies. So paint a really desirable picture, plus make that user believe that it's highly likely. That's in the denominator of this equation. The numerator is going to be time. So how long is that going to take? Plus effort or sacrifice. So a really desirable offer with a really high likelihood that it's going to work is on the numerator. A really short and easy experience is on the denominator. And that's the reason that plastic surgeons can charge so much more than, gyms or exercise products, because plastic surgeon, you go in, you sit down, you wake up and you're skinny. Whereas a gym, you gotta wake up every day and go work out and eat well. And it's really hard, right? So that's why plastic surgeons can charge so much more than gyms. All right. Step 5 is on the creative, video scripts and storyboards. This is where the rubber meets the road and you're actually creating the creatives. I can't get too much more into that at this point. But then step 6 is just ad production and editing. And step 7 is launch and learn, where the fun happens. So folks, I really hope that you enjoyed this session on YouTube. I am a major fan. We're doubling and tripling down. We're getting all of our B2B clients set up and going on YouTube. Just like any other platform, this will get crowded as more and more people discover how awesome it is when you do it well. It's going to get crowded. It's going to get more expensive. I highly suggest that you jump on the bandwagon now while there's still some value arbitrage to be had. And like I said, I'm happy to do a follow-up on this. Like if there's a sizable response, I'm happy to go into more detail. Just ping us on LinkedIn at the Revenue-Driven CMO. You can tag us, ping us, be like, hey, Chris, please do another. That was awesome. And I'd be happy to do that. If you have any specific questions about that, let me know. I'm also going to include a couple of links in the show notes, primarily to a couple of B2B advertisers that are doing this really well. And I'll link you to their ad library so that you can see the types of creatives that they're running. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you did enjoy this, if you got some value from it, pay it forward, share this with a friend, like us on LinkedIn, or drop us a 5-star review wherever you get your pods. We definitely appreciate that. And we read every review. But that's the pod, guys. Until next time, thank you for listening, and we will see you on the other side.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Revenue-Driven CMO. We really appreciate you being here. For more details, show notes, past episodes, head over to revenue-drivencmo.com. This show is brought to you by Level Agency, combining AI-enabled performance marketing expertise with the right mix of data and creativity to fuel growth. Catch you next week.